When I learned about receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award, I started thinking about opportunities I'd had over the last 50 plus years I've been in scouting, and the fact that those opportunities would come along based on volunteers who were working with me as a youth or working with me later as an adult, and how important it was for me when opportunities came along to really take full advantage of those and be able to fulfill those as best I could, and then also find opportunities for other people to be involved in the program or be involved in some area where their expertise was really going to be important to the program. And so over the years, as I thought about it too, I thought, well, the group that I'm going to be talking to, or they'll see this video, will often do what I did as a youth, and that is think, well, the guy is 45 or he's 60 or whatever, and he just suddenly was beamed here on Earth and had accomplished whatever may have been accomplished. And I started laughing about that when I thought about my mother being a den leader and starting me out when I was 8 years old in 1963, and began working with her and a friend of ours as the den grew and the pack grew, and then we transferred to the troop, and how the troop itself provided opportunities for leadership and growth, and the great volunteers that we had. And so when I started thinking about what does it mean for a lifetime of achievement, I got to thinking about all of the volunteers, all of the other young men that I have had a chance to work with over the years who really made a difference and had an influence on me, and were able to provide opportunities not only for me individually, but for a group and for the troop. And then eventually when I became National Chief of the Order of the Arrow in '74, the fact that the advisors I worked with on the National Committee looked for ways for us as youth to be out in front, to learn from our mistakes, and really be able to identify opportunities for us to grow. I remember George File saying to me when he was chairman of the committee that there used to be a training program that Martin Mockford did when he was secretary of the Order of the Arrow, where he would go to the lodges and teach about lodge formation and policy and those kind of things. And we had just been able to elect 6 new region chiefs, brand new region chiefs, first time ever. And the region chiefs needed something to do. We had 2-year terms. We wanted to be able to provide more service and more leadership opportunities. And so George and I visited at Thanksgiving. We talked about it briefly. He told me about Martin's old approach, and I called him up a little bit later and I told him, I said, George, I got this brilliant idea. We got to do something like, say, a national leadership seminar, where we would actually have a syllabus, talk about lodge policy, talk about relationship with the council, those kind of things, and work directly with the region chiefs in doing that within the region. And the sly old guy that I loved, he was like grandfather to me, chuckled and said, Brad, that's a great idea. And I got off the phone after I talked to George and realized he'd set me up. He'd been planting seeds the whole time. And so I think over my career, both as a youth and adult, the seed planting became something that was also important to me as an individual as I worked with other people. And you think about people like Mike Hoffman. Mike's the chairman now of the committee. Mike was the national vice chief in 1985. He's 10 years younger than I am. But at that point, 10 years felt like a huge amount of time. And so over time, we've been able to appoint younger members to the committee, give them opportunities, and now they're in leadership roles like Mike is, and Kerry Minery, Clint Takeshita, others who have been able to do that and really be able to provide service to scouting. Glenn Alt, for example, is the vice chairman for the Jamboree as it comes up in 2021. And so the ability for the Order of the Arrow to be involved in things and have opportunities to serve has opened up over the last several years. I think because we took a risk with a project called AeroCore 5, and that project was a great success. It could have been a failure easily, but that opportunity came to us because the Forest Service said, wouldn't you like to do more than what you're doing in Northern Tier? And we said, yes, what do you have in mind? And they said, well, we've got 123 forests in the United States, and those forests all have work that needs to be done. They don't have the funding. So why don't we go through and identify what those are and if that's an opportunity? And we weren't prepared for that at all in the sense of having it brought to us. But once it was brought to us, it fit naturally with what we try to do with Trail Crew and Northern Tier and Sea Base and the work we've been doing now at the summit. At the time, we had a cadre of young people who knew how to do trail work. And most of the work that was needed at the forest was trail work, cleanup, grooming of the trails, those kind of things. And so as we began developing and thinking about it, we said this is an opportunity we need to take advantage of. And we can help the forest at the same time. As we worked through the process, there were lots of obstacles to take two bureaucracies, the Forest Service and the Boy Scouts, both of whom were roughly 100 years old, and break down the barriers and be able to work together. And that happened over a period of time. And then as we began doing this and had the volunteers involved at each of the sites, we were able to identify additional staff, bring them in, and we actually exceeded at every site the work that we had planned, even with less people in some cases than we thought we might have. And so as a result of that, the Boy Scouts of America really were able to demonstrate, like they did back in the 30s with the Eagle Trail projects that many of the young men were involved in national parks in particular. We were able to demonstrate who we really are as an organization and what we mean by servant leadership and the concepts associated with serving other people. And so one of the things I was really pleased about was the outcome of that and the reception we received by not only the public, but the BSA itself. And the last site was the Grand Tetons, Bridger Teton. And when we talked about this, I got a letter from Ed Pease, chairman before me. And Ed sent me a note and he said, Brad, I want you to know that the AeroCore 5 project not only has transformed the way others look at us, but it's transformed the way we look at ourselves and what we can and can't do. And I thought about that and I said, that's really it. It was a stretch by all measures, but it was the kind of thing that really allowed us to identify. And I think one of the most interesting things that happened was at the closing press conference up on the Teton Pass in Bridger Teton, just up the trail from Jackson. There were bicyclists that just couldn't wait to get on the new trail down into Jackson. And this one young man walked up to me as we were getting ready to start the press conference, and he said, Mr. Haddock, could I show you something? And I said, sure. And he said, well, come here with me. So we walked up the trail and then back down a ways from where we were, and he looked back and he pointed to the trail and he said, my crew did all of this. What do you think? And the young man was 16, and I said, you did an outstanding job. He said, well, I can't wait to bring my own kids to see this. Well, and the other thing that I found was I was at every site from Wednesday to Saturday. Clyde Mayer, who was the national director, was there from Saturday until Wednesday when I arrived. So we had overlap and were able to see everything that was going on. And I would go out on Thursdays and work with the crews and say hello and visit and thank them. And I had three things come up all the time. The first one was, hey, why haven't we done this before? And usually I'd laugh and say, well, you do. You do it in your own scout camps, you do it in public parks, perhaps at home, things along those lines. It just never has been done like this. The second question was always, what in the world are we going to do, and when are we going to do it again? Or when are we going to do this again? And I would chuckle and say, look, my hair's gray enough without planning another one for a little while. The third thing that I always heard was, this is the best event I've ever been to for the Boy Scouts. And universally, if I asked them why, they said, well, I've been to Jamboree or NOAC or this or that, but the reason it is I'm serving other people. I'm here working on a project that benefits others and not me. And that was very, very special to me. So I think as a result, we saw servant leadership in action, and people that were involved in it took it away as a practice rather than just a concept. And that was very, very critical, I thought. You know, when I became an ordeal member, I remember the chapter chief introducing himself and talking to me and visiting with me a while and asking me what I would like to be involved in. And I didn't know anything about the chapter or the lodge or any of the structure, but he followed up with me later, as did my assistant scoutmaster, and got me involved in the chapter. And I became the elections chairman for the chapter. And I had a brilliant advisor assigned to me who was a major in the Air Force, stationed at McConnell Air Force Base in Wichita. And Major Sisson and I worked together on that and developed a strategy so that if I was told no from the unit leader, he would follow up with the unit leader and get us scheduled anyway. And so it was a great tag team match, and it was the first time we'd ever had 100% elections in that chapter. And what I learned from that was the teamwork between the adult and the youth to really work together in a way that gave you as a youth opportunities to do things you would otherwise not try to do, or maybe at least think you could be successful at. And Major Sisson was always very good about encouraging me. I think because of the ability to serve in the over-the-air, which is our primary purpose, is to serve the council, serve the unit, you learn very quickly that if you will subordinate your own interests and you will work to serve other people, you begin getting a tremendous amount out of that, because it is not only satisfying to those you serve, but you see the results and the reaction that they provide, rather than saying, well, I'm the chief and I'm above picking up the chairs and the tables after the banquet and those kind of things. You begin seeing that part of your role as a leader is to set an example of service, to provide that kind of service to other people. And John Maxwell summed it up really very well in his small book he was written years ago called The 21 Indispensable Qualities of a Leader. And he says a servant leader subordinates his own interest to that group, to the understanding of who he's working with and what he's doing. The servant leader looks for ways to serve. They see ways to serve. They don't walk by the dishwasher at home and not realize that the dishes ought to be put in and maybe started as a young person. Third, he says that you have the confidence to serve, which means I'm not worried about someone else that I'm leading seeing me doing service, seeing me doing menial things or whatever else may be involved in making sure that I'm able to serve other people. The fourth area is, he says, they will initiate, they will really look for ways in which that service can be provided and understand the group. And finally, he says they do it because they care, they love people. And when you think about the way we've socialized servant leadership in the Order of the Arrow and now throughout Boy Scouting in the last, I would say, 20 years, you really begin seeing not only, let me say this, you not only hear people say servant leadership, But you know, when they say it, they understand what it means, and they're working on applying it in their own lives. And that, to me, is really what, as a young airman, being involved is an opportunity for them to grow as an individual and really appreciate who they are in the context of servant leadership and serving other people.